Weeks later, everyone's still talking about it. How did he do it? How did Donald Trump defy the odds, the polls, the pundits, and win the election? Well, he had those enthusiastic crowds for sure, but even Trump, the anti-establishment self-funder, did get experienced help and outside money. And one of the key people, a Costa Mesa political consultant, Eric Beach. In just a few months, he put together one of the biggest and most effective pro-Trump PACs. It raised and spent more than $30 million, made headlines with some ads, and got into some controversy. So what was it like in the trenches of a historic campaign? Well, Eric Beach is here to give us the lowdown right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University, with its Center for Science and Technology, under construction in Orange, California, is a proud sponsor of Inside OC.
It really was a referendum, not just against sort of, the establishment, but it was a referendum on politicians in general and media in general,
Wow.
and he hit that nerve.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff, and I'm talking with Eric Beach. So, Eric, it has been a wild ride for you these last few months.
It's been wild and fun.
Yeah. So you ran this super-PAC. It really got together in about March of this year. So a year ago at this time, if somebody had said you were going to be working on a campaign for this businessman, Donald Trump, what would you have said?
I would have called him crazy. But really what Trump is a derivative of is the grassroots and even the Tea Party movement. And in prior elections, we've always asked our grassroots to go after the establishment candidate or the candidate with the most funders or the most money, and he really bypassed that. The irony of Donald Trump is that he's a billionaire, but he's also a grassroots candidate at heart. And now we had the opportunity to put the money behind the grassroots, and really for the first time in our party's history, were we able to do that.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit. Tell us a little bit, who is Eric Beach and how did you get involved with the Donald Trump campaign?
Well, look, I'm a regular human being. I came out to California 16 years ago, really not knowing what to do. And I was trying to work at a football camp, and I had met some individuals that were working on a state race out here. From that, we went into the recall in 2003 with Arnold Schwarzenegger. While it was a 3-month campaign, it was a career-changing moment for me. Not only did I get married to a beautiful woman who I met on the campaign, but I also met so many people, and we won. And much like 2016, that campaign was designed to blow up the boxes. Sacramento was failing us in the state of California, and really, I think many people think that the U.S. Congress and the Senate, that they've been failing us for many, many years. And so we've been electing leaders and going to Washington, and Washington has been changing them. I think there's a lot of duplicative things that have happened in this election that happened in that recall election.
Yeah, and I'd like to get back to that with you because I think most people would say Arnold did not succeed in blowing up the boxes. Trump is now talking. He doesn't say blow up the boxes. He says drain the swamp. So we'll see if he can do that. But anyway, okay. So here you are, a political consultant. Who are some of the people over the years that you have worked for as a campaign consultant?
Sure. I've worked with Bill Simon and Bill Jones here in the state of California, and of course, Governor Schwarzenegger. And then nationally, I've worked with folks like Rudy Giuliani, who's a hero of mine, Speaker Gingrich, as well as Rand Paul. So most of the candidates I've worked for, they may have been a little bit outside of the mainstream, but they've all been big thinkers. They've all had a certain patriotism to say, I want to help change this country and make it a great place.
All right, so you said Rand Paul. Did you work on Rand Paul's campaign?
Right, I was Rand's national finance co-chairman, and one of the things that I thought about Rand was that he was a very inclusive candidate. It wasn't just reaching out to the millennials, but he was inclusive. I mean, his famous lines were, we're going to have men and women of all different races and genders, but they're going to have tattoos, they're going to have earrings, they're going to have whatever they are, because we're going to be a big tent party. You can argue about Donald Trump in terms of his rhetoric. The one thing you can't argue about is that he has helped grow this party. Because there are people that have never voted before. And in our data, we looked at the low propensity voter time and time again. He was bringing new people into our party.
So tell me why, though, that Trump succeeded. Rand Paul did not succeed. Gary Johnson, Rand Paul, known as a libertarian type of candidate. Gary Johnson, who ran as a libertarian candidate, got 3% of the vote, which is more than libertarians have gotten in the past. But still, it's 3%. They did not succeed. Why did Donald Trump, who I don't think most libertarians would say is libertarian on a lot of issues, why did he succeed where they failed?
Well, I think, guys like Rand Paul and Gary Johnson are one leg of a three-legged stool, right? Where Donald Trump was able to be the perfect trifecta. I mean, he was able to bring in and really bypass the special interests during his whole election. And really his signal of, hey, we're not going to be bought and paid for it in Washington, D.C., resonated with the American worker and the American people. Secondly is, he did talk about, the cost of war and really making good, sound decisions on our foreign policy. And that is a big libertarian. I mean, libertarians, they talk about, U.S. first type of foreign policy. And I really believe that we've lost our way in the last 20 years of having a U.S. first based foreign policy. And Donald Trump talked about that time and time again. When we talk about immigration is not let's just try to keep the Hispanics out of our country. It is about protecting American interests. We've had candidates time and time again that have not stand firm with the American people to protect their interests first and foremost.
How do you respond to people that say some of that rhetoric of Donald Trump's is hateful? And as we speak, of course, Trump is putting his cabinet together, and we're still waiting to see what policies he will actually be pushing as president. But there's a lot of fear out there that he's going to be deporting people, tearing families apart. And, how do you respond to that?
No, I think you can't have 300 million policies for 300 million different Americans. You have to have a set of policies that are going to help people flourish. The one thing about Donald Trump is that, he's based on a meritocracy. I mean, he has earned his way to be in the position he is financially as a businessman. And I think that's what we want for all of our citizens, whether you're, white, black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, whatever it might be, okay? He has policies that help Americans flourish. And I think that's what we want out of our elected leaders. We cannot be, a gender-based or race-based type of nation or country and have different policies. What we want is we want people to flourish on a set of ideas that help them, whether it's in the economy or whether it's jobs, whether it's really just, again, protecting our borders or whatever that might be. So I think we have to give them that opportunity in the first 6 months to look at the actions, not the rhetoric. And so what I would say to people is let's give him time. I'd say, just like President Obama has said and Hillary Clinton has said, let's give him time to see what he can do as president of the United States before we start talking about his rhetoric during the campaign.
Trump says some things that by regular political standards are outrageous. Recently, he made the comment that 2 to 3 million people, I believe, or several million people had voted illegally. Okay, and there's, as you know, the media then immediately goes crazy, saying
Sure.
there's absolutely no evidence to support that. I guess the thing is there a method to this madness, if you will, of these quotes? Is he simply operating on a different level than any politician has before? And how do we deal with that? Because it used to be that you would, a politician is supposed to say something that at least has some semblance to the truth, and Trump seems to just exaggerate everything.
Well, here's what I think is interesting about him. And I think that there's, in terms of his rhetoric, when he talks about policies or things of like voter fraud, he's bringing awareness to issues that we wouldn't have talked about both as a party and as a country. For example, illegal immigration. Prior to him jumping into the race, it was probably number 7 or 8 on the list. The truth of it is he had the foresight to understand that Americans care about illegal immigration because they equate it to job creation and keeping jobs here at home, right? And he was able to put those types of things together. I think voter fraud is the same type of thing. I mean, there are bills in California, for example, that allow illegal immigrants to vote. Just by design, that is unconstitutional, right? And so what I think he does is try to set the narrative. And I think that it does undermine the media a little bit, because I believe that the media, or at least the mainstream media, and to a certain set, some of the establishment, they try to frame the narrative in advance. But I don't think he likes to do that. I think he likes to bypass that, so you have to talk about his narrative and maybe peel it back a little bit or get it to a more reasonable conclusion. And lastly, he's a deal maker. So I think sometimes he tries to go hard hitting at the very beginning, and just like Ronald Reagan used to say, you're not going to get 100% of what you want, but if you get 72% of what you want, you're in good shape. I think he starts from that standard.
So we're living in a world now where our president is he's a real estate negotiator, if you will. And so when he says 3 million, what he's really saying is that this recount, because I think that was what spurred him to make that comment, was the push to have recounts in some of these states. That is so ridiculous that I'm going to come back and I'll make a ridiculous statement, but it's going to draw attention to the other side of the equation, which is that it wasn't my side that had illegal votes. It's the other side that has illegal votes. Is that, am I starting to grasp what Donald Trump is about when he says things?
Sure. Well, look, in the third debate, he talked about maybe not accepting the election results. And the media and the Democrats went berserk. The irony of the recount, which, by the way, my PAC, Great America PAC, we filed a lawsuit against Jill Stein, is that there's a non-aggrieved party in Jill Stein filing a lawsuit that may tamper and be fraudulent to help not count these electoral votes. If Hillary Clinton wants a recount, she has a right to do that, then she ought to do that. And so I think he wants to set the narrative to say, listen, there's voter fraud that goes out there. There's been videos with Project Veritas and others that show that there's voter fraud. And again, from my perspective, a lot of it comes from the Democratic side, and maybe there's evidence of it on the Republican side. I just haven't seen it. So let's bring awareness to that issue. So if you're going to have a fraudulent, in my opinion, recount effort to maybe manipulate this election, then yes, he's going to call it out and make sure that he frames the debate in advance. So I do believe that's what he's doing.
Let's talk about the PAC, how it got going. How did this PAC come about?
Sure. So
which is Political Action Committee.
Correct. It's technically called a hybrid super-PAC. And what that means is, you can bring together small dollar contributors with large dollar contributors. One of those large dollar contributors is actually from Orange County, Bill Doddridge, who owns the Jewelry Exchange. And Bill and I would fly to every single debate, look at all the different candidates. Yeah, we were supportive of Rand, but we also did an event for Dr. Carson. We were, for lack of a better word, shopping for a candidate. And the reason is you have to feel it. I told you earlier, I was coaching football. If you have 2 quarterbacks, that really means you have 0 quarterbacks. And while we may have had 17 to 19 great candidates, it really meant that we didn't have any candidates, right, to really take on and take advantage of this opportunity going against, I think, a very weak candidate in Hillary Clinton. So we went to every single debate. We went to Iowa. We went to the Reagan Library, went all around the country, and we really found what we were looking for in Donald Trump. And so not just because he had the advantage. So we actually started the PAC in January. And we formed it with the idea of merging the grassroots together with the donor community. And it's never happened before, at least on the Republican side. And the order of the super PAC, for me, is a form of patriotism. On the Democratic side, traditionally you have unions that are able to take money out of people's paychecks to use for political purposes. For our side, we don't have anything like that. It's very transparent. If you give a contribution, it's known that you gave that contribution. And if you have the means to give $1 million or to give $5 million or even $5 to show that kind of support for the candidate that you believe is going to change the country, then you ought to do that. In Donald Trump's case, he wasn't seeking small dollar contributors. He really wasn't seeking supporters to come online and build a data system. He was running a non-traditional campaign. We filled that void early before the first primary votes were cast in Iowa. We formed in January, and we took off from there. We ended up raising $30 million, and we're very proud of our effort.
Yeah, $30 million out of maybe how much total was spent in the Trump campaign?
I'd say it's probably anywhere from 150 to 200 million when you look at the RNC.
Which is less than half of what the other side.
Probably about 35 to 40% of what Hillary had.
Okay, it's funny you made the comment that you consider PACs, super PACs, to be patriotic. A lot of people, as you know, consider it the major cancer in our political system. That's the Citizen United ruling, that allows rich people and corporations to take over our political process. What's your response to those concerns?
It's a transparent process. I'm in California. I'm in the super-PAC state because we have initiatives seemingly every 6 months. You have to have the ability to change, and make sure that you get your message out, right? We live in a world now of social media, paid media, and you need to have the means to be able to do that. But from my perspective, there's also got to be an efficient way of how you spend money, right? And we did that the most effective way, and we were mocked about that. For example, we did these ads that were 1-800 ads, and call in and say, dial 1 if you agree with us, dial 2 if you don't. And what we were really doing is we were building a network of very rare voters. And those rare voters were unique Trump supporters because they had not participated in this process before. So what I would say to people about that is, it's known and disclosed whether or not you give a contribution. And again, if you have the means to do $5 million or $10 million or just $25, that's showing your form of patriotism. I'd actually go on the reverse side. I think campaign limits, what that does is, it reduces your way of participating in the election process. It's not a game. People are voting for somebody that they believe are going to shape policies to help America. And I'm not a skeptic. I think people want America, all Americans, to be prosperous, to be fruitful, and everything else. And so I don't have any kind of skepticism about it being in the business for about 15 years. I go back to it's the greatest form of patriotism that you can have to be part of that kind of in a campaign circumstance.
We're showing some of the snippets from some of the ads that you ran, and a couple of them hit Hillary Clinton pretty heavily on Benghazi. You had a Navy SEAL, you had the widow of a soldier who was killed in Benghazi, and some folks say, that's such. That's hitting below the belt. That's just what's wrong with the political process is that, guys like you, will run these ads and kind of distort reality in order to get your person elected. And is that just the business you're in, or how do you?
No, I don't agree with that at all. She's been running for president for 16 years. She has to run on her record. I think the biggest mistake her campaign made was not talking about ideas of how she's going to, help the economy, how she's going to create jobs, how she's going to secure our border. She's never had to do that, and she, quite frankly, was never asked about the press on that at all. If you go back and watch any of the 3 debates, she was never pushed on that. It's always been about Donald Trump. And you mentioned earlier about distorting records. I mean, she raised 3 times the money that Donald Trump did, and she had, I think, it was a 7-to-1 ratio in terms of negative ads to positive ads against Donald Trump. What I would say is, what we found in our data, that national security and the economy were the 2 biggest discrepancies between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. So my perspective was we were pointing out the facts, and we were making sure that we drawed those margins out between the 2 candidates, and we were very successful in doing so.
I want to run something because then I want to follow up with a question for you. But it's a interview you had with CNN with Don Lemon, and it I think shows just how accurate you proved to be on your prediction, but also some of the skepticism, even kind of a sneering dismissal of Donald Trump from the pundits. So let's take a quick look at that.
Let me read this tweet first. Donald Trump tweeted this out. He said, I look very much forward to meeting with Paul Ryan and the GOP party leadership on Thursday in D.C. Together we will beat the Dems at all levels. Do you think that these big donors, Eric, are waiting to see what happens with Trump's Thursday meetings? Are you waiting as well? Does this change anything for you? Or will it?
Well, not really. I mean, in 2012, we lost 8 out of 9, of the swing states. This time around, I think we have a great chance to win in certain states, and I think you're actually going to see this become a wave election. I mean, on the other side, the winner tonight of the Democratic primaries, Bernie Sanders, the energy's with him, but he won't be the nominee. On our side, the energy's with Donald Trump, and I think you're going to see some coattails as an effect of his being the nominee.
All right, Eric Beach, thank you very much. I would watch the TV because these guys here have a lot to say, have a big reaction to what you said, so I would stick around for it. I appreciate it. Lots more to come tonight on the primaries. Thank you. We appreciate reaction from these guys. Coming up. There we go. We'll be right back.
So
sorry.
a lot of chuckles, like ha ha. And at that point, that was actually a big night for Donald Trump. He started to separate himself from the other candidates. Were you kind of used to that sort of response from the political pundits that there's no way Trump's going to win?
I was, and I am to this day. The reason is I've been part of the Tea Party movement, and I thought that the Tea Party movement was unfairly vilified for really just going out there and saying, we want to make our country great again. And the kind of rhetoric that I had saw from the Republican punditry class, just really the media in general, I thought, again, just provided a false narrative all the way through midnight on Election Day, quite frankly. And so, do I feel a certain sense of validation because of, Donald Trump winning? Yeah, a little bit. More importantly, I think that in 2012, there was an autopsy report done by the RNC, and it said,
That's the Republican National Committee.
Excuse me, yeah. How do we grow our party? And it really talked about, having a Hispanic message and having a message for the minority communities and all that other kind of stuff. Donald Trump didn't do that, yet the result is even greater than that autopsy report could have hoped for, which is growing our party. How did he grow our party? Well, he didn't say, I'm going to hire the best woman for the Secretary of Education. He kept claiming, I'm going to hire the best person. Everything I do, I'm not going to have different policy for a different set of people because we're all Americans. And I think that's what he captured. The Tea Party movement also captured that. And I think he's, again, a derivative from that movement. And I'm really proud of that the grassroots was able to be represented in this election cycle. A lot of the conservative pundits, if you will, have talked about it for many years. That we need to listen to our grassroots. And this is the first time that we've done that.
How did you ever think we're not going to win this thing? Did you ever? When did you feel the least secure about things?
I thought that he won the third debate. I thought that if it was just on the...
You mean where Saturday Night Live shows him walking around stalking Hillary and all that? Yeah.
And I thought he had a great debate. But I also went to I went to a lot of his rallies where, again, I was seeing people that this wasn't just the angry voter coming out going, oh my God, I'm so tired of it. After the third debate, when he had talked about maybe not accepting the election results, I thought that was exaggerated by the press. I thought that they honed in on him. And I lost faith a little bit in his candidacy. But what I also found was his supporters and his surrogates, and that was one of the things that we did as a PAC, really rallied against him. And when you look at it, the press had a lot of overreach in this election. I believe there was a major referendum on both the media and really, the Democrats as a whole, and a lot of the establishment Republicans. But folks like John Voight and the actor Sheriff David Clark out of Wisconsin, Dorothy Woods, who you referenced earlier, they all came together. We did a national bus tour after that third debate because, again, we were seeing it out there. We were seeing it out there, not just with our data, we were seeing it on the road. And as people talked about, these rallies, they don't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything if he has 15,000 people there. That they're not the voters. No, they were the voters.
How did you feel when he got hit with the tape? They're making the crude comments about women. Did you ever think, oh my gosh, we're going down?
Yeah, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and more importantly, I thought there was no place for that rhetoric, whether it was private or public. At the same time, he had the benefit of running against a candidate whose husband, I believe, is one of the worst offenders of women in our history. And so, I thought that was definitely a damaging moment for him. But I was also, as president, you're going to get knocked around. As a candidate, you're going to get knocked around. And I thought his response to that, coming out, talking about it, addressing it, and also just saying, look, I'm not going to let you continue to twist this over and over again. I'm going to stand up for myself right away. I thought that was pretty good. We want that out of our leaders. We want leadership in crisis, and that was a personal crisis for him that I believe he overcame.
Interesting that you point out that Hillary brought some baggage to that whole issue of treatment of women, not herself, but because of her husband and allegations. Do you think the Democrats are saying we ran the wrong candidate? Would Trump have beaten Joe Biden?
Well, I tell you who I was scared of was Bernie Sanders, not just because of his policies, but In the primary campaign, the energy and enthusiasm were well with Bernie Sanders. She didn't hold a press. Don't forget, Rick. I mean, she didn't hold a press conference. I mean, very few.
Okay, so you're saying Bernie Sanders would have been more imposing?
I thought so because, again, this was about changing Washington, D.C. And even though he was senator and in Washington, in that bubble, he was representing that in his campaign. Okay. I think she made so many mistakes in her campaign, but as I mentioned earlier, she never provided a vision for the country.
And we are out of time for this segment.
Thank you for having me.
But I want all the viewers to know we are going to do a part 2. So we'll continue this and we'll be running that later. We've still got a lot that we can talk about, Eric. Great, so we'll continue. So that's it for now. Thanks again for this segment to my guest, Eric Beach. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University, with its Center for Science and Technology, under construction in Orange, California, is a proud sponsor of Inside OC.